Full out of Pittsburgh, rolling down the eastern seaboard.
Welcome to Movie and a Beer, everybody. This is Dan bringing us in, and we have a really interesting post-holiday episode about holiday travel. And we have some wonderful friends and co-hosts with us tonight to talk about this fun 1980s era film.
I'm Blake. I'm your travel expert.
Ooh, travel.
This is Brian. I'm your train expert.
And I suppose I'm all the planes and automobile expert then, since you're just doing trains, right?
That is correct.
All right. So
You are the booking agent for this travel down your podcast.
yeah.
Adventure.
Dan, I want my effing car with the effing wheels and an effing key. I want it effing now.
Effing now, yeah. So
And
planes,
wipe
trains,
that
and
effing
automobiles.
smile off your face.
So Neil Page, played by Steve Martin, who's an advertising person in New York.
Yep.
New York, back in the 80s, where you could actually catch a cab on the street. You didn't have to Uber or you didn't have to use an app.
Yep,
You just
yep.
stood out there and waved your arm. Had competed with somebody who's 6 degrees of separation from everybody,
Kevin Bacon.
Who
Who I forgot was in the movie till you just said that. He's
No.
in genuinely one scene.
he's one scene. Well, no, they do a couple of different shots of them running down the street
In a
trying
single
to catch the
scene.
cab. in
it's
a
still the
scene.
same scene. He's outside the cab and he's inside the cab.
Yeah.
But it's still the same time and place.
Yeah.
But anyway, what movie are we talking about, Dan?
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Nicely
Thank
done.
you.
Or Trains, Planes, and Automobiles.
And-
What is it? Which is it?
It's planes, trains, and automobiles.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
With Steve Martin and John Candy.
Yeah.
And this
R.I.P.
is a film that was done by someone who's done many films, John Hughes.
Yeah, written and directed.
And we were just momentarily ago chatting about like how many different films from that era he did and how randomly he just disappeared off the face of directing and movies and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just like he was there one day and the next he was gone. But that's okay.
He was a powerhouse throughout the 80s, man. He did Pretty in Pink, Breakfast Club, Uncle Buck. He wrote the first draft of Home Alone, which 80s to early 90s?
Yeah.
Whatever got made, it was like early
a
90s.
solid 80s swath of cinema.
All right. So on this day that people aren't traveling, they're recovering from eating too much food the night and day before.
Yeah, so we are recording this the day after Thanksgiving,
Yes.
but this is a get home for Thanksgiving movie.
Yeah.
Yes. This is the
Yeah.
closest that we could get to an actual, like, hey, there are Thanksgiving movies out there that
Well,
are
I didn't
really
want to watch a
bad.
kids movie. Yeah, a lot of the kids
Yeah.
movies ones are like Tom the Turkey's got to save the day or whatever. And
Happy Thanksgiving, Charlie Brown.
yeah, that one's not my favorite. Like the Halloween Great Pumpkin's better,
But this is really a great representation of kind of the hectic before Thanksgiving, trying to get home in time for this magical event where you get to eat a lot and be with family.
it's honestly it's a fun historical piece about what life was like before COVID.
Or cell phones.
Yeah, before cell phones, before COVID, but
Before computers.
yeah, it was just
It was
like
really archaic.
I mentioned early on. I like that this feels like a real, like it takes place in a real world where there's just traffic everywhere. The place are stuffed full of people. Like a lot of movies, they stage it to not have any traffic.
And
or
realistically, weather snares holiday travel.
Yeah, yeah.
And just one small event sets you on your hero's journey, as it were.
people. Oh
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Being not able to fly from New York to Chicago and landing in Wichita, Kansas, of all places. And then how do you travel
Which is
back
pretty.
then?
Which is remind me of my geography. It's a pretty good ways south of both cities,
It's west
right?
of Kansas City. Yeah. Kansas City is
So
about a 4 hour, 3 to 4
It's
hours
way,
south.
way southwest of Chicago.
Yeah.
Which
Okay,
is where.
okay.
Yes.
So he overshot his destination
What a
Quite a
weird.
lot.
What a weird.
by about as much as New York was from
Yes.
Chicago.
Yeah, so he
It's such a
doubled the
strange
time.
diversion. Yeah.
Well, when it's a snowstorm and there's nowhere to go, you have to go out of the storm. And
right.
if
You,
it's
you
cold
land in
there,
the safest.
yeah.
airport.
And
Okay,
that's
that
what
makes
happens.
sense.
That's what happens. They were the last ones to take off, I think, because they had an airport shot. But
Yeah.
all right. Before we get farther into the film, we did have a couple beers.
Yes.
I do want to briefly mention.
Good call. Good call.
I was like, hey, this is a travel movie. We're recovering from all the food we had. Let's not do anything super heavy. So I was like, hey, the other day I had the Pelican Brewing Head Out Hefeweizen. It's American style, just basically a really lemony wheat beer, which was really mild and nice to drink. It's just super mild. And then I was at the store going, hey, we haven't done a Von Ebert beer in a while. Let's do one of their Pilsners. And I grabbed the German style pilsner from Von Ebert. So this is a little more hoppy than I remember it being in the past, but that's okay. It's still really mild. We will talk more about these beers later on in the episode, but just to preface it, yes, we knew what we were going to watch ahead of time, and I was like, hey, I'm at the store. Let's just grab a couple of 4-packs. Both relatively around $10 for a 4-pack. I think actually the head out came in a 6-pack of Tall Boys for like $10, and the 4-pack of the pills from Von Ebert was like 8 something. So not terribly expensive.
Reasonably priced.
Reasonable for what they are. And I do know, like, at least the Von Ebert's gotten some medals for this beer because it's pretty decent. But I digress. This movie is a really interesting travelogue on how not to get stuck somewhere and how to use your connections to your advantage. Because seriously, John Candy knew everybody because he'd sold shower curtain rings to everybody.
What a specific thing. Or did he sell hand autographed Daryl Strawberry earrings?
Yes.
Or did he sell earrings worn by Elizabeth Taylor?
Yes.
I was going to say Hurley, but I don't think she was a big name at this time. Not till the early 2000s.
Correct.
Right. So for those of you who haven't seen this film,
Yeah.
it follows the trajectory or the advice of any scriptwriter of always throw obstacles in your main character's way.
Yeah.
And it really is a movie about overcoming obstacles. The goal is get home for Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And then everything that can go wrong will go wrong.
And since we're following Neil Page, Steve Martin's character, he had the struggle of getting a taxi cab. He had the struggle of the plane being grounded. He had the struggle of finding a place to sleep.
Well,
the plane got diverted.
He wanted to be in first class. He
That's
got put in economy class with John Candy's character, who had stolen his taxi.
Which he didn't know.
I mean, John Candy was kind of his initial obstacle.
Yeah. I mean, he tripped over his trunk immediately.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that I didn't notice until this watch through. I've only seen this movie like twice before. As Neil's making a deal with that attorney to like get his cab, like, I need this cab. I have to get home. You see like little bits of flashes of Del, his trunk, his blue windbreaker. Like you don't quite see them until they're stuck there in the actual airport. Going, do I know you? I feel like I know. I'm great with names, but I'd be darned if I can't remember who you are.
Yeah, you stole my cab.
No, I've never stolen anything.
That's how you know.
I've never stolen anything in my life, buddy. Like he's just John Candy's just a big sweetheart in this movie. Such a fun, kind of goofy teddy bear with a real sadness inside.
He's a bumbling obstacle for the main character.
Yeah,
but innocent.
He's well intentioned, but he never really does anything right.
Yeah, he gets them that room in the hotel where they share a bed, and then they get robbed. And
that's not their fault, though.
No, but he also rents a car under Neil's name, thinking, "Oh yeah, Neil would have done this for me." When Neil showed no indication of being a nice guy. He's just a cranky. Yeah. He's not quite a curmudgeon, but he's just a worn out dude trying to get home for his kids.
And I think the main story points at finding while people have flaws, they're still good people, and you can treat people well. You don't have to treat them poorly, which in the beginning of the film, he was really kind of staged as somebody. He was an executive in an ad agency, and it's all cutthroat, and he just wants to get out of there.
Yeah.
And he turns around and finds out, hey, sometimes you just can't be in a hurry. You just have to deal with it as it comes along. As those obstacles get put in your way, learn to adapt and overcome them. None of the ways that he came up with worked. He had to rely on someone else who he felt was lower than him.
Right. Yeah, Neil really grew as a person. Like, spoiler alert, I guess, but like this movie,
for a 40-year-old film.
Yeah, this movie's like plenty old enough for you to have seen it and not worry about the ending. He eventually comes around and realizes he notices the clues and helps out Del in his, I guess, darkest hour. Like Del's kind of
has nowhere to go.
Yeah, but he's traveling. But he's traveling somewhere.
It seems like Del has been in this pattern for the last 8 years since his wife died.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Does the character of Del have a character arc?
No, I don't think he does. He just admitting that there's a problem and admitting he has nowhere to go is the arc.
He's just one of the obstacles for Neil to kind of grow as a person.
Right. So he is the thing that initiates Neil's character arc.
Yeah.
And I would also argue that Neil's character arc isn't great.
It's not-
I mean, it's not really big.
Yeah, he seems like a decent enough guy at the start. He just wants to get home to see his family. And then
Right.
the way he interacts with people
his
changes.
His growth is to maybe broaden his definition of what family is.
Yeah,
It
I buy that.
includes this additional guy or someone who is really in need during the holiday.
Which I think you really see that when Neil's on that railway, like the train,
elevated train,
the elevated train in Chicago.
Yeah.
And you see the little flashes of his like memories. He sees his kids, like, oh, I can't wait to see my kids, my wife, and then he gets flashes of Dell, like, oh, that big,
it's very heartwarming.
that big softy, and then he notices little hints, like, oh, Dell doesn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah,
This guy I've been yelling at, and we got like an end of Act 2 speech at like the halfway through Act 1.
yeah.
The whole like, are you an idiot? Are you blah blah? I like me. My kids like me. This is awfully early for these like sad speeches.
I would almost argue that is the beginning or the end of Act 1, where Dell decides, okay, I'm going to throw in my lot with, or where Neil says, I'm going to throw in my lot with Dell.
I'd buy that.
And that is the action that propels the rest of the film.
I'd buy that. That makes sense. Despite all the things we're talking about, how heavy it gets, this is a comedy.
It is.
It's
And I was
very
gonna
funny.
say, it's a lot of sight comedy. It's a lot of like 80s SNL kind of vibe.
There's one speech I referenced at the opening where it's the only time there's like genuine swearing, which is what earned this movie an R. Where Steve Martin has, because Steve Martin is so charming, even when he's being a complete, and you can believe this, Dan, asshole. But just he's frustrated, he's burned out, he thought he finally got it, he doesn't get what he wants. He yells at this rental car clerk, played by Edith something. She plays the secretary in Ferris Bueller. She's just great Midwestern actress. And he just loses it, and she hits him back with, "Do you have the rental agreement, sir?" And he just deadpan, "I threw it away." Which
Well,
gets
you're
him every time.
also,
You're effed also.
She hits him with it. And it's like, God, I love Steve Martin's delivery. And John Candy's being just like this gregarious, fun, like, kind of Midwest weirdo, or where does he say he's from? Does he say where he's from originally? He's just an everyman. He's an everyman. He's just a fun everyman who sells shower curtain rings.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of a bumbling everyman.
Yeah, but that's great. I mentioned during the movie, it feels like a Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck cartoon, but toned down.
a little bit, yeah.
I mean, it's not a lot of pratfalls.
No.
And weird vaudevillian stuff. Yeah.
Like Neil's definitely
Very
not
much
meant.
so, yeah.
Like if they met anywhere else, Neil and Dell would not be friends.
No. And I think that's made
and
clear
most
at the
of the
very
film,
beginning.
they were not friends.
No, they were just, and he kind of like, when he's thinking to himself about stuff, he's like, I am just here. I need to get home. I don't care how I get there. I don't care how much it costs.
Yeah.
I don't care what I have to go through. I just need to get home because I promised my wife and my kids I would be there.
Yeah.
And so,
Which is traditionally a Christmas kind of thing, but I like they did it for Thanksgiving.
yeah. And I think that the simple fact that he said multiple times throughout their journey, I just want to go on by myself. I can get there faster by myself.
Yeah.
It's easier to travel by myself than with two people, because then you're dealing with all the stuff they dealt with.
Oh yeah.
So it's not necessarily wrong for him to have said that. Again, it's like, I think it's an interesting growth story about his perspective and point of view in what he's doing versus the reality of what he's faced with, and how does he come to grips with, oh, I need to learn how not to be that way, because that's not a good way. I mean, it's fine, but it's not going to be nice to other people. And I think that's what he realizes.
Yeah. I think you see that when they're driving in the melted car, the partially burned down car, and they're singing. They're like freezing. It's like a convertible in November.
Right, yeah.
November, and then
it's the idea that we're all in this together.
Yeah. He finally accepts, like, yeah, okay, this is happening. We're gonna get there. We're gonna sing. It'll be great. And then the car gets impounded. Again, another challenge for him to overcome. The car gets impounded because everything's melted. It doesn't have anything working.
But gregarious Dell was able to find them a ride for the final lap of their
in the
journey.
back of the refrigerated cheese truck.
Yeah, well,
Yes. Well,
but it got them there.
It
It
did.
got them there. And that was the whole point, was just to get him there. And I don't think Dell even wanted to go to Chicago. Who knows if that was his destination or not?
Well, I mean, Thanksgiving, nothing's open. Like, what was he going to sell to? Was he just going to
why
hang
was
out?
he going to Chicago? I mean, he was on the original flight.
I imagine he knew somebody that he could stay with.
guess.
Dan mentioned earlier, he had connections everywhere.
Yeah.
Every other scene was him saying, "I got a good friend. I hooked him up with a favor. He owes me one. We're gonna have a bed here. We'll have a car here. We'll have a yada yada yada."
And that's a cool thing to do.
I mean,
Because he didn't have to do that either.
he did.
But
What
he's
you
like,
see is what you get.
and
He's a nice
in his
guy.
inner monologue that does get shown, he's like, I finally found somebody I can, be friends with.
And take my shoes and socks off next to on the plane,
and-
which is fine if you're not next to somebody.
Yeah, no, these guys were cringing when that happened in the film, but I'm like, I've done that, but there was no one next to me. And it's-
Exactly,
you don't do that
Because
next
you
to
have
people.
manners.
Because
I'm like,
you're not a
yeah.
caricature of a cartoon person, Dan. You're a
Yes.
person with feelings.
So what
and
cartoon
thoughts.
character is he then? Yeah, I mean, you had said Daffy Duck.
Dell's
and-
Daffy Duck
Yeah.
and Steve Martin's Bugs Bunny. It's the straight man to the comic relief, even though they're both very funny. And Steve Martin does some really funny stuff, like pulling his fingernails out of the car when they suddenly stopped, or doing a couple of pratfalls, like the only pratfalls in the movie. He's definitely the straight man to the silliness that is Dell Griffith, because Dell's a silly guy. He was like hawking his shower rings as earrings to make cash to get food at the bus station.
At the bus station, yeah.
And
and
Steve
he
Martin
was quite successful.
yeah,
He was.
it was great. And Steve Martin's just trying to get home to his kid. If he didn't have Dell, Neil would be a pretty boring character.
Yes.
And especially if he had followed his friend's advice and say, just leave at 8. I said I'd be home by 9. Wow, interesting.
Well, and I mean, actually, without Dell, I think Neil would have been stuck in Wichita.
I'd agree with that.
He would have never gotten back until 3 days after Thanksgiving when
Oh,
the
but
flights.
Because if
ran.
Dell never showed
They-
up, he would have gotten that taxi
Yes.
and still gotten stuck.
That is correct.
And they did say though, while he was like the next day, it was like an airport shot, and
Yeah.
they had on the overhead all flights. Or no, it was on the news. I think it was the news that when he had turned the TV on, all flights had now been
Oh,
resumed
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
Chicago.
yeah.
So he could have gotten a flight,
Oh,
but he chose to follow this path instead of listen to the news forecast or
Yeah.
whatever, and find out that he could have gotten home faster. But
Which is probably why his wife was so like emotional when he did get home. She probably saw this like, why is he not here yet? Why is my
cheating on
husband?
me.
Why is my husband not here?
he's making excuses.
she should have driven and gotten him
Yeah, that
an
that
hour
was
and a
a
half drive away. Come on.
huge plot issue that they could have
That
just
I
driven
had
to
a
pick
problem
up.
with.
Yeah, and I agree.
Being an Midwesterner who has been stuck in Chicago at Christmas Eve.
Yes.
Yeah, take your
It's
kid-
not that hard to get in the car and go.
Especially if your in-laws are visiting, leave the kids
Yeah.
with them. Go get your husband, bring him back.
I know exactly. And it's
That would've
like,
been-
why didn't that happen?
It's the same reason that Home Alone, you don't question how they can afford to get everyone tickets to France in that huge house.
Yeah.
That's a big house. And his uncle calls his kid a jerk. Who does that? Anyway, we're talking about planes, trains, and automobiles. Love the comedy. Love the character development. Did this feel like a John Hughes film to you guys?
A little bit.
I think just it being in Chicago is the only thing that really clicks for me.
I think the overall visual style matches
Yeah.
his visual style and how he directs. I think the music score was like straight out of the 80s.
Yeah.
Felt very much
Oh
of
my
its
God.
time.
Yeah,
That-
yeah, I'd buy that.
That like weird synth poppy happy music. And you even had said, how does this music fit the scene? Like,
Well, that last scene, it's a really over. It feels like something after the end of like a dramatic thriller, and this wasn't that. It was a comedy drama.
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Even though, when John Candy was doing some funny large man stunts, there was
Doing
a
the
lot
best
of
around.
a,
and you're doing
a
the
lot
best
of
around.
tuba in the score.
Yeah.
A lot of brr, brr,
Yeah.
brr type stuff.
I
There
buy
was.
that. That makes sense
And
for
there's-
John Hughes' style.
So if you have seen this film, look up the trivia if you're going to rewatch it, because there's some
Yeah.
interesting things about this. There's some funny spoofy. IMDb is a great place to start, but there are other places you can find trivia about it. I pointed out to these guys. I was like, one of the top things was there's a scene at
Yeah.
the very end, not the very very end, but close to the end, when they do get to Chicago and they're waiting for the L, and Neil gets on the train. And John Candy's left there at the station at the platform, and it pulls away, and then it shows just before he gets off again, it pulls up to a station, and you see somebody walking backwards, and you're just like, and I pointed to the guys, I was like,
it's
no, I read
real
this.
quick.
It's super quick.
Yeah.
It's just like a second long. It's just like bam, bam, and it's like,
And,
oh yeah,
and so that's
You can
an
catch that.
instance where the editor flopped the shot
Yep, to have it come in from the right direction.
to have it come in from the right direction. Personally, I saw no reason to flop that shot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they didn't need to, but yeah, they did what they did.
It happened.
I found some trivia I would love to kind of test you guys on.
Okay.
Sure.
There are different actors considered for both Neil and Dell.
Oh,
I see 3 names here. top of your head, who do you guys think were being considered that would be on IMDb for Del Griffith? Think 80s, think comedy.
Like anyone from the Ghostbusters?
I'm giving Dan a look.
I would
Give me a
say
name.
Jim Belushi.
He's not on there, but I wouldn't be surprised. Dan, give me a specific name.
I can't remember their names though. My brain's failing me. Mr. not Vakeman, but the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, really?
Bill Murray was one of them.
Murray? All right.
Bill Murray as Del Griffith would have been really funny. Also considered Dudley Moore
Oh.
and Robin Williams.
Oh, that would have been
interesting.
That would have been really, really cool to see him just doing Robin Williams' shtick.
He would have just gone off script the whole thing.
God,
He'd
it
been
would-
it would have been chaos.
Just roll.
That
Just
would've been so
roll.
fun.
It's okay. We don't
Oh
care
my
if
god!
it's on script.
Oh no! My trunk. I'm sorry, Neil. So sorry. For Neil, there's two names I'm seeing here. I'll give you a hint. One was a superhero, and the other was on early SNL. Not Bill Murray for Neil Page.
So an early Superman would have been like, what's his name?
I didn't say Superman. I said early superhero.
Well, Superman is the only early one that's been on movies.
I'm gonna go ahead and just say it. Michael Keaton
Oh,
was considered for a Neil Page,
Interesting.
Oh, that would have
which
been
I could
interesting.
see. The other one, Chevy Chase.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could absolutely see Chevy Chase
Yeah.
being that role.
It's very Spies Like Us or Spies Like Me.
But
Yeah,
he
yeah.
wouldn't have played the straight man as well.
No,
He plays a
Not
straight.
nearly as well.
I assume he would have done what he did in Caddyshack, where he's being a straight man, but throwing little bits of silliness in there.
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
But I think Steve Martin did a better job than Chevy Chase would have.
Yeah, I
because
think
Steve
so.
Martin usually has this like beautiful delivery where he states like a crazy thing, but his tone's just all over the place. Like, oh man, this is terrible. We're all having a bad time, and he runs around.
Well, I mean, you pointed out a few times where his delivery in the situation isn't how his visual is.
Yeah.
So he's
God,
very angry.
him
you can see him angry. but
Working
what
in
he's
retail
doing
for
is
so long, I
hilarious.
loved him going, I threw it away. I would have loved that if I just asked somebody, okay, you can return this book. Do you have your receipt? I don't have it. You know what? That's good enough for me. I'll do the return. yeah,
Unfortunately, that car rental woman is like, no, you're out of here. Get out.
Apparently, the original cut was like 3 hours.
What?
I don't know if they have all the film still, but John Hughes shot a lot of footage.
I'm glad they edited it.
Yeah, it's
it would
plenty.
have felt long.
We're ready
Yeah.
for the director's cut of this film.
no, we are not.
For some reason, it has Harrison Ford doing narration. Talking about replicants.
Yeah, well, you know.
But yeah, I watched this movie sort of recently, like 2 years ago, for the first time. Then and watching it, understood. I see why this is not a classic, but just as regards to good
Part
comedy,
of the
like
canon.
It's,
How-
it's a moment in time.
yeah.
And it fits the period really, really well. It doesn't stretch your imagination. There is towards the end some suspension of belief
Yeah.
where it's like you have a car, it had a car fire, yet the car still runs, and it's all burned out, but it's like it didn't really burn out all the way, and you're just like you're sitting in it. I'm like,
And the credit
okay,
cards
yeah.
are melted, but not the wallet.
Yeah.
But that again, for comedic effect, like here's my gas card, charcoal. Here's my Amex, charcoal.
Here's my Diners Club card. And Diners
Charcoal.
Club, I don't even know if that still exists.
I'm
Yeah,
not sure what
that's
that.
an 80s
I'm
thing.
young enough that I'm not sure what that is.
It's like a MasterCard or Visa or any of those.
Yeah,
it's like
but
a
it was-
Discover. I think
it
we
was
got
only
swallowed-
taken in
It's very
restaurants,
specific,
right?
Yeah, very specific places.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's kind of like
That seems awfully
I
specific.
don't know. Now I need to get my phone out or search the interwebs, and I'm not going to do that while we're talking. But
So, as a piece of like history, this covers the travel portion, not the like, because a lot of holiday movies cover like the drama of family and like tensions
Yeah, no,
people get together. This is like getting
the
home.
obstacle of getting home for
Yeah.
the holidays, which a lot of people who have distant families can
Oh, yeah.
relate to.
Yep,
for
yep,
sure.
yep. Went to school. I went to college. 8-hour drive away. I live on the other side of the country from my family now. I fully understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I personally have spent Christmas Eve in Chicago O'Hare Airport because I was snowed in
Oh,
on
boy.
the way home for Christmas.
Did you have any wacky misadventures with the lovable salesman?
No,
That's probably good. That's probably good.
It was all misery, and that was the last time I ever flew home for Christmas.
Understandable.
I just said, I'd rather pay less money to come home for longer in January.
Yeah. Our family's the same way. Where my parents if they can avoid it, they don't travel anywhere near the holidays.
Yeah.
Like it's just like,
It's misery.
Why put up with the stress?
Yeah.
No one there's happy to be there. It's gonna be depending on the weather. You might not get home in time.
Right. Yeah.
Which
I
then
mean,
it's like a whole airport full of angry people.
right. I mean, there is definitely something to be said for being home for the holidays.
Yeah.
But if you arrive there frazzled, stressed out, angry, and then displace your anger on your family,
It's not going to end well.
It's just not worth it.
That leads to the psycho thriller sequel of Planes, Trains, and Murdermobiles, where Neil kills his whole family.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting crossover.
Uh-huh.
Final Destination with this.
I would love that.
I mean, I was just thinking of like horror travel films, and it's like that's a great one because a majority of them die on the road. Well, not a majority.
Well, I mean, they get the
that's where
warning.
it
Well, the
starts.
first one, it starts on a plane, right? And he says, "We need to get off this plane,"
Yeah.
and then the plane explodes. And then ever since then, death's chasing him.
Yeah.
Right.
Lots of don't drive behind a semi trailer full of logs.
Boy,
'cause
I can't anymore. I change lanes as soon as I can.
That ruined it for me too. I was like, I can't do that. So just thinking about like how would that play into a great crossover?
That would be
with
a
this.
cool crossover.
Like, make it up. Alternate universe. Here we
I mean,
go.
if I had
Multiverse
my-
of madness.
I mean, it's funny you say that. If I had my druthers, I'd love to make this like an MCU crossover where like Captain America and Black Widow have to get back to the base for whatever reason. They keep getting into hijinks. You get a little bit of that in Winter Soldier, but like it's all spy.
little bit.
It's all spy drama.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to see her like, yeah. So I left the cigarette and I burned the car down with my shield in it. Yeah, your shield's in there.
Good
Yeah,
luck
but he
getting it.
pulls it out of his wallet and it's all charred.
Yeah, Tony
I need
Stark
to-
gave me this card. It's burned.
They're not alled back on the compound because they don't have any ID.
Exactly.
They're like, we don't know your cosplay. I don't know who
you could be
are.
a scroll. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. Let me see your ID. It burned up.
I have the shield. Maybe I can get a shield.
Yeah. They make those.
Brian, any crossovers you want to see now that we're doing this?
I didn't even think of that.
Because
it's
totally
fun.
fun. No, this is a fun movie. There's a couple points where it gets a little saccharine, which might be part of that John Hughes just kind of mush it in there.
Yeah,
but
that's John Hughes.
like the two speeches back and forth early on. But overall, it's a really fun movie.
Yeah, it is. And with this fun movie, we drank a couple of interesting
Yeah, we
beers.
did.
Yes, we did.
We drank
We-
one in the proper style, and the other one, I guess, in the proper style.
Yes, and I'm gonna ask as I reach my glass over. Hey, my friend, can you pour me some more water?
let
Because
me go ahead and
I
just get this position. I don't spill everywhere.
I did not hydrate during, but I'm hydrating after.
I refuse to hydrate.
Well, okay, so beer is 80 to
You're gonna
90%
dihydrate.
water, so
It's true. Hey, I like hydrating. My wife likes hydrating.
Yeah. So we started out with the Head Out from Pelican Brewing, which is an American style Hefeweizen, which is really basically just a lemony wheat beer. It really doesn't have the yeasty any spice at all.
Do Hefeweizens ever have yeasty spice? I thought they were always kind of heavier on banana.
If so, clove and banana.
Okay.
The esters are the banana. The clove is the spice.
I'm sorry to cut you off again.
This has-
Remind me what an ester is?
That's the flavor profile that comes from the yeast that
okay.
produces the banana-y sort of rotten flavor. People think it's banana, but it's actually more of just a rotten. The same thing that comes from farmhouse yeast. I mean, it's just a byproduct of the yeast as it generates the alcohol, beats the sugars, and poops out alcohol, and there you go.
Yeah.
And creates CO2. It gets bubbly.
That's right,
Here,
folks.
you have beer.
You have beer drinking poop. It's all good. So this is a really interesting beer. Let me read a little bit about it. This
Yeah.
is, let me scroll down on my notes. 4.8%, 30 IBU, inspired here. And if you've never been to Pelican Brewing out on the coast, they have a couple locations. Go to the one that's on the beach.
Oh, the one on the beach is delightful.
It's beautiful.
It's just it's genuinely on the beach. You get your beer, you wrap up, and you go walk around the sand.
Yep. So this is a simple wheat ale. Has light malt sweetness. It's bright floral character, melon-like hop aroma, refreshing, full-bodied. 2-row malt, wheat, Ella hops, pure Quebec yeast. So the interesting thing is, so again, we're going to talk about Quebec yeast here in a minute, but pure coastal water. So it is actually brewed on the coast, and they use reverse osmosis or something. If it's coastal water, I mean, it's not ocean water.
You have to
but,
take
you
you have to
know.
take the salt out of it.
Well, every
Yeah.
river and stream flows into the ocean.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So
sorry,
if they catch
paused.
a river or a lake or a stream
Right
somewhere
before it
upstream,
hits the ocean.
Yeah.
Sorry, I paused because I was about to say a thing about Jacobson, but I don't know if they still do it because I haven't worked there in a while. If we want, I can do the ad style that Aaron does.
You do some copy for us.
Inspired by our home in the Pacific Northwest, this beer celebrates the journey over the destination. Enjoy our bright and refreshing wheat ale, whether you're heading out to explore lush estuaries and action-packed beaches, or simply kicking back at home, diving into the subtle nuances of light malt sweetness and juicy hop character. This beer has to offer. Loaded with white wheat malt and balanced with melon and floral aromas, Head Out Hef will take you on a journey to discover new wonderlands of wheaty hop flavor, whatever path may call to you. I'd say except for the pauses, I kind of nailed it. We should just fire Aaron. No, don't do it.
So 4.8% for Hefeweizen is pretty close to being on point. American style tends not to have the clove and the estery notes. It tends to be more fruit flavored. I would say this hits all of those on the nose using a Quebec yeast. So Quebec is a type of yeast that's got introduced about 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Oh, so relatively recent.
It's a yeast that's been around for hundreds of years in the Nordic countries. We
miss you, Aaron.
Some researchers found it being used in some small towns and cities and villages. And they're like, hey, you're making beer with this yeast? What is this? And they took it back and studied it and said, oh, hey, well, it's called Quebec because that's what it's called back there in Norway and Sweden.
Quebec, like Q or K at the beginning?
Kveik.
Cool.
And the really fun thing about this beer is it does lend itself to being more of a Hefeweizen or a wild ale yeast because it generates those if you ferment it at warmer temperatures.
Oh.
So, again, there's 2 kinds of beers in the world, ales and lagers.
True.
Top ferment, bottom ferment, warm, cold. Very few yeast can survive at one or the other temperature if they're based on, hey, if I'm making a lager, if it goes above 50 to 60 degrees, it's going to be challenged. It's not going to really do anything until it drops in temp. Ale yeast needs to be above 62 to 65. If it gets below that, it's going to stop doing its thing.
Yeah.
Quebec yeast goes from 40s up to 100.
Whoa.
It's one of those weird creatures
So
that
it's a very
survive.
versatile.
That's a big range.
And the flavors it produces or byproducts it produces vary based on the temp it's at. So that's why this is like Quebec yeast is really, it's amazing for people who are homebrewers because you can use it in any kind of style.
Anything. Yeah.
And you can actually
Interesting.
hybridize beers by saying, hey, I'm using an ale recipe, but I'm going to use a Quebec yeast. I'm going to start fermenting warm, and then I'm going to cold crash it and take it down and let it sit a long time and still continue to ferment out and get different flavors out of that yeast at those lower temps. Or the other way around, start lower and go up or go back down or whatever you want to do.
Interesting.
So it's a great thing for people who are brewers to have those options. And usually...
Why would a commercial producer use that, though?
Yeah.
Because it allows you to make mistakes.
Like when you train the new
Glad
guy.
I asked.
Like when you train the new guy.
Yeah. No, seriously, if you screw up, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because the beer is still going to,
Interesting.
the yeast is still going to live and survive. I mean, as long as you're on your initial, fermentation tank and you're just letting it sit and do its thing. And if you're off a couple degrees, not a worry because it's still going to do what it needs to do. Some yeasts are very delicate and really only work at certain temps. This goes all over the map. And if it's a pure strain, it means it's even more hardy and can just do whatever. They probably have propagated their own, like it's expensive. They got some.
Their own
and
strand.
They're
They
just reusing
just clones it.
They're just reusing it over and over and over.
That's pretty smart.
Yeah.
So
And where could you find this fine beer?
Yeah.
So Pelican, this was
In
bought.
Dan's house.
Yes. Initially, some friends gave me a 4-pack of it the other day, but I did stop at Fred Meyer the other day and grabbed a 6-pack of this Tall Boys for about $8-9. And I grabbed a 4-pack of the second beer that we had, which is a Von Ebert Pilsner, also at Fred Meyer. I was like just walking down the beer aisle. The one in Hollywood District has a huge beer aisle with a lot
that
of
one's
local
great.
stuff. They have a great selection.
I love that location.
And their stuff rotates quickly. So if you find something you like, buy a bunch of it because they might not have it the next week. You come back to buy groceries. This beer is distributed widely. Pelican is a well-known brewery.
And I was going to make that point.
Vancouver has it.
At least here in the
suburbs.
Northwest,
Yes.
I've seen it in several locations.
Yes.
I've bought it before also.
You've had some not so fun experiences with it, though.
Unfortunately, I bought some that clearly was on the shelf for a while.
Yes.
And I won't talk about where, but it was heat struck.
Yes.
Unfortunate.
So
And
you want
unpleasant.
to make sure. So clearly, this beer is susceptible to
being left on the shelf versus not in
spoiling
the cooler.
if
Yes.
it's left on the shelf.
4.8%. There's no hops in it. I mean, 30 IBU is really, really low. You're not going to taste any of it simply because of the flavor, and the hops that they're using are just more pointing towards the citrus style and not super strong alpha acidity. It's not, they're really mild. Milder beers, again, as we've talked about many times, are going to go bad with heat or room temperature. You can maybe get away with a few weeks once it's brewed and canned. If it goes from refrigeration to room temp for a couple of weeks, you might be okay. But beyond that, if you're at a big box store and you see it on the shelf and you buy a flat or a 6
buyer
or 12
beware,
pack,
right?
Buyer beware, because that could very well be heat struck.
It needs to be in refrigeration. Could it be in a cellar?
A cellar or refrigeration, yeah. I mean, but
just as long as the general temperature stays low enough.
Yeah.
But not, at 70 or 80 degrees here when it's cold
If it-
outside. and they're heating the building.
Yeah.
And that's
And certainly
again,
not in summer.
Yes.
When you've got a Hummer.
I mean,
Yes.
in the Hummer, in the trunk of a Hummer during summer,
Right.
it's a real bummer.
You don't want to go there. It's not going to turn out well. This is one of those lighter beers.
This one turned out great.
Yeah.
I love the flavor. I used to be big into Hefeweizens for like a month, and then just sort of got over them. But every time I have one when it's like cooler, I think this is pretty good. This is a pretty tasty beer.
And again, this is American style. So this is again just a
It's
really
more fruit,
nice
not banana clove.
a lemon wheat beer. This does not have the fruity esters. That
I didn't
it
get a
normally
whole lot of
has.
lemon on it. I mean, I got a little bit.
A little bit on the back. I mean, and that's the nice thing about it. It's just a nice wheat beer.
Yeah.
It's not offensive in any way. People who are like, oh, I don't really like beer. Just
I
pour 'em one
think
of
it matched
these.
the
They might
movie
like
pretty. I think it matched the movie pretty well. Like
Yeah.
I pointed out the a lot of earth tones on Dell, and it kind of just pretty just not bland, like not muted, but just kind of realistic colors in the film. It's just very like it's just easy to watch. This isn't bright.
Yeah.
It's not like watching like Speed Racer or something with a lot of bright colors. It's real life.
And the film, true to John Hughes, was not an offensive film.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot. This is not a criticism, but it was not a challenging film.
I'd
in
agree.
most instances.
Man, some days I just want to eat some potato chips, man.
Yeah.
Some days you just want to watch a movie that doesn't make you think.
And so this beer, not challenging.
Yeah.
But not offensive.
Exactly.
Clean,
Enjoyable.
easy drinking, and it was fine. Unless it's heat struck, and then it's not clean.
It's gonna be
and it's
bad.
gross.
Then it's
It's
like
gonna not
then it's
taste
like
good.
watching Stanley Kubrick movie with the peeled open eyes.
Clockwork
Clockwork Orange.
Orange.
It's like watching Clockwork Orange in German.
Not fun.
But the other beer, I don't think matched as well, but I still liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I picked out a Pilsner. I was like, hey, we haven't done a Von Ebert in a while, and this was the
It
one
has
that
been a while, hasn't it?
I was like, hey, it says Pils on the can. Oh, this is the German style Pilsner, not their American style. Both are award winning. This one has World Beer Cup gold medal. And this also has 2022 silver from the Great American Beer Festival.
I mean, the
So
can's pretty cool. It's got the outline of their boar with the mountains in the background.
Fresh floral, white peppercorn, and lightly toasted crackers.
Yeah, I can taste the pepper in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
this
didn't
has a little
get
bit
the
of
pepper.
spice.
I didn't know what that was, but now I got that.
Yeah, I didn't get the pepper. I did get the cracker taste.
So
though.
4.9%. And you're going to get that toasted cracker from the malts that they're using, which are going to probably be kilned a little harder and be, let's just say, drier. And they probably, so when you make your beer, the first step is to take your grains and soak them in water at a certain temp. The lower the temp, the sweeter it is. The higher the temp, the drier it is, because the sugars release more and don't stay clumped up and combined at certain temps.
Oh, so
you'd
lower the
step
temperature,
mash
the
it. Yeah.
sweeter,
Yeah.
because they're not okay.
Yeah. So there's not
Cool.
as much activity going on. But the warmer the temp, the more activity. And then, of course, the hops you're using are going to give it more pungency. And so the yeast that they're using gives you that peppercorn. That is not a hop profile. That is not a malt profile. That is a yeast
That's
profile.
the yeast flavor.
And so if they're using a Bavarian-style yeast or some sort of German-style yeast, is going to have that. That's pretty much indicative of German-style beers tend to be more spicy. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's why this has gotten awards, because it fits into that category really closely. Super clean, crisp. Some of us drank it out of the can. Some of us drink it out of a glass. Thoughts on that? Any difference? Did you
I
notice?
only did can. It tasted fine.
All right.
I every time when it comes to pilsners, I don't notice a lot of difference between them. I can tell between different styles of beer, but within that particular beer style, I don't notice much difference. Like I had a pilsner yesterday, and it tasted not as robust as this one. Like this one definitely had more going on than the one I had yesterday. Mm-hmm. No, I liked it.
Yeah, I would say that this is a definitely more complex beer than the first beer we had.
Yes.
There's definitely more flavors in it.
Yeah.
I was tasting the pepper. I didn't know what I was tasting. I didn't define it. And I did not like the spicier flavor
And
as much as the
that's
first beer.
reasonable.
Super accurate and cool. I mean, it's not for everybody. Again, American style Pilsner, German style,
Yeah.
French, Italian, Spanish.
Martian.
Every country kind of has,
Their own
a take
style.
on how the Czech style Pilsners tend to be more sharp and herbal. This, German ones can have more spice. Italian ones are Italian style, and French styles tend to be more floral.
Yeah.
The American styles just tend to be more adjunct, so corn and
Yeah.
more of the
Corn and wheat flavor.
corn and wheat flavor. They tend to be more malt forward than anything else. And again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of those. This style, for what it is and what they advertise it as,
It's
fits
very much on style.
very fits
Yeah,
on style.
yeah.
It's very accurate. And
It's in the correct lane. Unlike Del and Neil when they got
Were
turned
not, and
around.
They were
and
never
almost-
in the right lane.
driving the wrong direction. I felt sorry for those people who were waving at him and yelling at them in
they
unison.
were drunk. Boo.
No.
No, I did like it. I don't know if it matched the movie as much, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, it was
I
still
agree.
really good. This felt like the first beer we were drinking felt like Del would recommend it, and the second one felt like Neil would recommend it.
I can see that.
And Neil would be wrong.
Let me prove you wrong.
No, I'm telling you, it's a great beer.
It is a great beer. So if you're going to watch this film, find something that's not necessarily distracting, but might be fun to go with a travel log.
Something easy to drink with your buddies.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a watch with your buddies movie. I watched it by myself the first time, thought this is fine, but it was great watching with you guys.
It's a little boring in one. It has one swim lane and it sticks to that lane. Very closely.
it takes
It's not a complex film. It's
Nah.
just character has a destination, has obstacles, overcomes the obstacles, gets to the destination.
This would be a great movie to just
Very straightforward film.
yeah. This would be a great
Plot.
film to play like behind a bar at like a cool place that just projects movies while the shift is going.
Because you don't need to know the dialogue.
No, yeah, it's just
You
watch
can
it.
see what happens.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you-
you can hang out with friends, kind of chat, and every once in a while get involved in the film,
Yeah,
have
like
a laugh.
like oh hey,
and
I
move
remember
on.
this scene. This is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about pausing it for pee breaks or anything like that. And
Yeah.
again, so not necessarily for kids. A lot of the jokes will go over their head.
It's a
Even
little
teenagers, even with the language that's in it,
Yeah,
it's really boring. And
yeah.
slow.
It's really for people who have had to travel for the holidays. People who have a bit of life experience to go. Yeah, I met guys like that. I know people like
you
that.
just been mashed together with someone you just don't jibe with.
Yes.
Brian, you would
Dan's right
understand.
there.
Don't talk about me like that.
Nah, we all get
can
along.
hear you. I can hear you.
Now we all love each other.
We do.
Great Hollywood take on travel film. I think there aren't a lot of them out there that, at least from the 80s and 90s, that work as well as this one does. There may be newer ones. Like I said, if I was going to mash up, I would turn this into a horror film because that would be more driven and more interesting to watch. Just as a comedy, it's really shallow and it's kind of boring. I'm sorry, as compared to today's movies, it's really
I almost
slow
want
and
to
boring.
say I read a blog somewhere that pitched that Del Griffith was the devil testing Neil, but I don't know if that's actually true. If I'm conflating with another movie.
Well, okay, so when they were traveling the wrong direction and ended up going in between the two semis, and the car was throwing up sparks, and they were looking at each other, and suddenly, John Candy's character's in a devil outfit,
and I'm wondering if that was like,
and they were maybe this is another surprise. They showed them as skeletons, and does that mean they actually died at that point? And then the rest of the movie is them
him
with-
going through
with-
purgatory to get to
with
heaven.
trying to get to-
purgatory
yes.
atonement to get to heaven, which is back with your family.
That's why that weird music played at the last scene.
Maybe.
Although, according to the trivia, John Candy, the movie Uncle Buck ends the same way, with John Candy doing a tight lip grin, and the movie just freezes. Like, what? Why?
Yeah, it
Why
doesn't make a
is
lot
it
of sense.
the
It's a John Hughes thing. It's a signature.
It's a
I mean, he
signature
does
move.
freeze it on John Bender throwing his fist up at the end of Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there is something to be said for deconstructing the film in that way and saying, yeah, maybe it was they died.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of room between two semis on a 2-lane highway going one direction. I'm sorry, but they probably died, but you don't
I like that
know.
the trucks were keeping even with each other, which is a weird thing to do.
Yeah, they're not supposed to do that.
They're not.
And they showed it for a long time before they got there. They're like, oh,
They must have known. They must have known each other through a arm wrestling competition.
Yes.
Crossover with Over the Top.
Yeah, there you go. Who's driving that truck?
Oh man, those guys really drove between us.
Sylvester Stallone was driving one, and his son was driving the other. That's why they drove side by
That's
side.
the crossover I want.
Holy,
Tune in next time to a movie and a beer where we make that movie.
we're gonna make it.
We're going to review a movie we made. None of you have seen.
We're gonna drink a beer that Dan made and not tell you about it.
That's right.
There you go. All right. As always, thanks for listening and hanging out. I mean, this was an interesting film to watch post-holiday. Travel is still happening. I have friends who traveled to the East Coast yesterday.
Hoo-wee.
They made it
And
safely.
they've got to get home.
And now, well, no,
This
they're
weekend.
going to be there for a week, so it's an extended stay. But yes, they had to travel on the day after. They traveled this morning. Actually, I think they're at the airport at 5 a.m. So
Ooh-wee.
yeah, good luck to them.
Good luck to
in
them.
their travels.
Good luck to anybody who travels at any weird hour for any
Yes.
reason for the holidays.
Plan appropriately. Take extra things.
Yep.
Take that kitchen sink.
And invent teleportation. That would solve it all.
Yes,
That
it
doesn't
would.
teleport you where your head's backwards. You got to look at your butt like in Spaceballs.
Yes.
Right.
All right. So as always, the opinions expressed during the taping of this recording, those are the hosts. Thanks for hanging out and listening.
And if you don't hydrate, you're going to dehydrate with a great set of shower curtains.
shower curtain rings and shower curtain.
Yeah,
And-
I dropped the ball on that one.
So this is Brian signing off. Thanks for listening.
This is Blake signing off. I don't know why I went to Brian first, but okay.
I'm just like, somebody's gonna say goodbye, good night. All right.
Well,
so
usually
goodbye
Aaron
and
kicks
good night.
up, but
Yes.
he has to go. He's traveling.
He's not here.
He's
He's
traveling.
currently dealing with a John Candy type, talking his ear off and cuddling him in bed.
on a bus or something. I don't know. Anyway, Aaron,
How
come back
does
safely.
he rent a car?
I
How
don't
does he
know.
go?
Let's not
think
blow
he
up
does.
Aaron's spot, but I think
All
so.
right, fair enough.
All right. Thanks for listening and hanging in there. Have a good one. We'll talk to you soon, people.
Bye.
Happy holidays.
Down